Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Okay, greetings everyone and welcome to the October listening sessions for the California Truth and Healing Council. We've adjusted our listening schedule and have general listening sessions this week on Monday from 1 to 2:30 and today from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And then the regular business meeting of the council will take place on Friday at 1 p.m. We encourage you all to attend the council meeting on Friday to engage directly with the council members. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the Tribal Advisor for Governor Gavin Newsom. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm joining you from is the ancestral homelands of the Patwin peoples. I'm now going to briefly walk through some of the logistics for today's session. First, we are recording this session, and it's available for public participation via Zoom and dial-in. There is a passcode. In case folks are wondering, Zoom has now made it so that you have to have a passcode. So if there are folks that you are hearing from that do not have the passcode and are trying to get in, please let us know so that we can send it their way. The recording and summary notes will be available on the CTHC landing page and blog when they're ready. For those of you interested in following the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the listening session summary documents, are available at the California Truth and Healing Council updates blog at catruthandhealing.com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, background information, and other materials, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. And these links are in the chat for your use as well. If you have not already done so, we'd appreciate if you could update your name to let us know who you are. And as we get into the discussion portion of today's session, we'd appreciate those that are comfortable to get on camera if possible. We're going to start with brief introductions of those of you who have joined us, and then as always, we'll dive into a quick overview to get everyone up to speed on recent updates, and then we'll go into the listening and discussion portion of today's convening. If you would like to speak at any point, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. If you're using the Zoom app, you should be able to raise your hand using the app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows or Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you've dialed in, you should be able to raise your hand by pressing *9. And if you've dialed in, you can unmute your line by pressing *6. You can also email written comments at any time to info@catruthandhealing.com at your convenience. Now, before we begin, I'd like to remind participants that all of our council members, council staff, and many of you are members of the victim population in need of collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council, our office, and each other with respect and with your whole heart in a healing mindset. Many of us doing this work are navigating systems that were not built for us to make change that was never contemplated. This in itself takes an enormous amount of patience and emotional integrity, and we're all doing our best to make strides in these spaces. So thank you again for joining us. And now I'm going to turn it over very quickly to Loretta, if you'd like to introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll have any of the council members who are present introduce themselves as well.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Loretta Miranda, Chief Deputy Tribal Advisor and Special Counsel for the Governor's Office. Currently joining you from the ancestral homelands of the Cahuilla people. I am Serrano and Cupeño from the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. Good evening. Welcome to our evening session. If you want to share some food with us, that is totally fine. We can come together that way. Just happy to see you all here.
Thank you, Loretta. We also have Michael Park on from our office, and he really runs the show here. So if any of you need to get in touch with us, if you'd like to meet with us, or if there's any materials we've talked about that you'd like to get a hold of, please feel free to message Michael directly. I am going to now turn it over to any of our council members who might like to introduce themselves. I saw Council Member Elliot Santos and Council Member Bajorquez on, if you'd like to say a few words, but you don't have to.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name's Angela Elliott Santos, and I'm the tribal chairwoman for the Manzanita Band of the Kumeyaay Nation, and just happy to be here with all of you this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Bojorquez.
Mishi Sorpeto, Inca Tekarak, Isaac Bojorquez. Good evening, I'm Isaac Bojorquez. I'm Ohlone Costanoan. I'm the tribal chair for the Kakutaru Band of Costanoan Ohlone Indians, the Big Sur Rancheria. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. I do see we also have a few tribal liaisons on, so if anything comes up that might impact their work, they're here and listening. And at this time, if anyone else would like to introduce themselves to the group, you can do so at this time. Otherwise, we can also do that later in today's listening session if you have any comments. But again, as always, we'd like to listen to see if anyone is wanting to introduce themselves to the group. Otherwise, we'll jump into today's presentation.
My name is Didi Manzanares Ibarra, and I'm the tribal chair of Umshana Maturatai Ohlone. And I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm glad to see so many people online. This is a little difficult because I'm kind of in like 3 different Zooms at one time. So I didn't have anybody else to cover for me tonight, but I didn't want to miss anything. So if I have to leave early, I'm sorry, but I want to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves at this time?
Also, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing so.
Okay. Then I am going to go ahead and get started. And in addition to introducing yourselves in the chat, if you'd like to do so, you can also put any comments in the chat, or you can also message me or Loretta or Michael directly so that we have your comments if you don't feel comfortable sharing with the group. Okay. I'm going to share my screen at this time. And it might help if I had the PowerPoint open already. Okay. And okay.
And we can see it. We can also see it's like in the presenter's view.
Okay, let me switch this up. Better?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, apologies for the technical issues. It's the time of night where things just start going wrong. So before we get started, I wanted to go over the council meeting principles that council has adopted. And the council has adopted these basically to dictate how we act with each other in all of the convenings of the council. And so in order to create a safe where participants feel welcome, respected, and able to speak comfortably, we're going to uphold the following principles in all convenings of the council. We ask that all participants, which includes council members, authorized representatives, staff, moderators, and the public, work towards sharing in their stewardship. If you're a participant in a convening with the council, we ask that you engage in the work of the council and with others in an open and respectful way. That you engage in behaviors that will make others feel welcome. That you take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being. And that you seek support as you need it. What is respectful engagement? This means to affirm the person and critique the ideas. Provide feedback constructively and with the intent for mutual growth and healing. Welcome feedback and challenges to your opinions. So in this space specifically, as we work toward honing ideas and recommendations and different ways of approaching this work, it's important to discuss the actual ideas in front of us rather than have personal attacks, take personal aim at people's character based on the ideas they're discussing, because we really need a space to have these ideas and the interchange out and this discourse amongst participants. Avoid contributing to assumptions or generalizations about tribes, tribal communities, or other groups. Do not ask individuals to speak for their perceived group. Speak only for yourself. Offer participants the benefit of the doubt. Spirited discussions are expected on these topics. See this as a sign that folks are engaged and care, and remember to be respectful as you speak, read, and listen. Honor confidentiality. Do not share others' experiences or information without permission. So in the context of this work, we're going to hear a lot of personal narratives, personal experiences, personal viewpoints, and it's just very important that you don't share this outside of the context of what it was intended to be shared or where it was intended to be shared. So if someone comes to these spaces or when we're in in-person meetings, in bigger listening sessions and talking circles, and they're sharing something that they would prefer remain more confidential, or that is their own first person narrative, it's important that you respect that that's their story and honor confidentiality where they've asked for it or expect it. In this space, it can be very easy to pass along stories that aren't your own or to use those stories in other kinds of work or documentation. And we just ask that all of you respect the fact that people don't come by sharing on that easily. And want to make sure that we honor people's courage in sharing these stories and don't act in an extractive way by taking those stories and using them in ways that they weren't intended to be used. Assume that you have relative privileges and both explicit and implicit biases. Know that others may or may not have had similar opportunities, experiences, and background as you. Recognize that their contributions are equally valuable. For those from dominant identity groups, refrain from contributions that prioritize dominant experiences over those who have been marginalized. What is welcoming behavior? Make behavioral adjustments for virtual communication. If you wouldn't say something to someone's face, refrain from saying it virtually by voice or text. It's important to remember that even though many of us are in the comfort of our homes and so may not have the same kind of awareness of social dynamics, that we want to maintain a respectful space. And so that's why we have this principle here, is that particularly in the COVID era and the Zoom era, folks may be emoting or sharing or saying things that they would be embarrassed to say in public or in a different context. And so we just want to make sure that we're keeping that discourse respectful and civil. Know that the use of strong language, capital letters, and exclamation marks can be easily misinterpreted online as unwelcome yelling or aggressive behavior. This is another piece. Most people engaging in this work come with something, and everybody brings the depth of their experiences and the lens of their experiences. So some language that in your head may sound less aggressive or may not sound like it's yelling could be interpreted as something completely different by someone who's reading it. Remember that tone does not carry via text. People might not realize that you're joking or being sarcastic. Leave space for engage and express comments and ideas if you have spoken recently by letting people finish their thoughts before adding new ones. Personal well-being. Take steps to ensure your physical comfort. Some examples in virtual meetings include shift your sitting and standing position often, Take a purposeful deep breath regularly. Raise your eyes to look beyond the screen and/or sit back from the computer when possible to relieve eye strain. Keep a glass of water nearby and take sips throughout sessions. Please consider physically leaving the computer during breaks. Participate as you are able to and adjust your presence as needed, whether that's turning off video or stepping away entirely. It's not expected that all participants will or should be present for the entirety of the council's work. We know and support that you will take time to eat, take care of your families and pets, but be aware that virtual convenings will be recorded and available to the public. And that said, we know we are meeting during dinner hours right now. So if you feel like you need to eat, don't feel like you can't go on camera. We are all aware that people need to be eating and taking care of themselves at this time. Set up supportive resources such as food, water, ergonomics, and privacy while offloading responsibilities if possible in advance of convenings. Plan for breaks and stick to them. And seek support from your own networks or from provided resources as needed. Please alert council staff to any concerns as soon as possible by emailing our intake email. And seek support. We recognize that participants bring their entire selves and histories with them to the council, and that topics explored during the course of this work may stimulate emotions and thoughts that would benefit from accompaniment and support. Although trauma responses can come from a variety of sources and contexts, the council understands that those who have experienced disparate treatment due to their Native identities may specifically want to seek assistance related to historical trauma and related issues discussed with the council. Council staff will be providing supportive resources for participants to be available for the duration of the council's work. So now we're going to go over the listening session agenda. So today we'll go through an overview of the council and its charge, and this is to get everyone up to speed, as we know that we have new people in every one of these sessions. We'll then go over the agenda for Friday's council meeting. We'll then have updates about the subcommittees and then also be soliciting some feedback about the work of the subcommittees. And then we'll talk about regional meetings, and then we'll open up for general listening and discussion. So what is the California Truth and Healing Council? The California Truth and Healing Council is a council made up of representatives from California Native American tribes charged with bearing witness to, recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native American narratives to clarify the historical relationship between the state and California Native Americans in the spirit of truth and healing. The council will submit a final report of findings to the governor's office by 2025. The final report should reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state. The final report may also make recommendations aimed at reparation and restoration and consider how to prevent similar depredations or policies in the future. So the council is organized under a charter and is made up of voting and non-voting members. There are 12 voting members from each of the 4 regions, with 1 seat for a non-federally recognized designee in each region. Each region also has an alternate voting member to ensure quorum for action. The council welcomes and encourages all available methods for public participation. This includes attending and observing all meetings of the council, submitting written statements to the council, making oral statements and testimony to the council, participating in interactive dialogues, panel discussions, and informal meetings, organizing and hosting affiliate events on issues relevant to the work of the council, and joining the work of the subcommittees. If you're a California Native American tribe, we're seeking to begin initial consultation meetings. Please reach out to this email if your tribe is ready to meet. We're flexible about the method and mode of meetings, and meetings will be recorded and transcribed. Tribes may share as much or as little as they're comfortable with. And outside of tribal consultation, the council and the Tribal Advisor's Office are available to meet with Native American individuals, organizations, and groups at their request. And we're still doing mostly virtual meetings, but we can be flexible, but we'll probably require some, baseline things like masking, outdoor meetings where possible, and would want to verify vaccine status as well, because we do not want to necessarily be putting folks at risk unnecessarily. The council is currently meeting on a monthly basis, and this is virtually until further guidance is issued from the state. And we were going to cancel these 2 meetings because we weren't sure if the legislature would issue or would issue legislation that would allow for us to meet virtually, because our ability to do so is based on certain waivers of requirements of Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Acts. But the legislature did act, and so we are going to meet on Friday virtually and in November virtually. So the agenda for this Friday is as follows. We'll have a welcome and a roll call, and then we'll have a traditional opening. As per usual, if anyone from the public would like to do that traditional opening for the council, we are happy to accommodate you, and we can send you presenter credentials to be able to do that. So if you'd like to do that, you can directly message Michael right now, or you can also email us at the info at catruthandhealing.com, and we will accommodate that request. We'll then have council member updates, and this is anything that the council members have done or anyone they've met with over the past month that they'd like to share with the council. We'll then have an overview of the consultation request and timeline for responses, which will be going out this week. And then we'll have the subcommittee updates and community input. So what we're really trying to do is restructure, at least for these last 2 meetings, the business meeting agenda, so that we can get feedback primarily on how the work of the subcommittees should move forward. Because each of these subcommittees has the ability to shape how it looks, how it engages, and how the public also engages with these subcommittees. So we'll start with the funding partnerships subcommittee, and we'll have an update and overview of the partnership with the Decolonizing Wealth Project that we announced on Indigenous Peoples Day. And I'll be talking about that shortly as well. We'll then have an update from the Youth Council subcommittee and try to get feedback on how they would like to move forward. We'll then have an update from the Elders subcommittee, and we'll have some updates throughout this listening session as well for each of the subcommittees. And then also solicit feedback on how that subcommittee moves forward. And then we'll hear from the Status and Identity subcommittee, any updates, and also hear from the public about how they'd like to see that subcommittee working and whether they have any recommendations for potential moderators in that space. We'll then have the Education subcommittee give an update, and then have feedback from the community about what they'd like to see in that space. And then we'll have an update from the Deliverables subcommittee, and then see if there's any community input in that space. And again, the Deliverables subcommittee is a subcommittee that's going to be primarily looking at what are the actionable outcomes that this council is looking to put in its recommendations. So there are several things that the community has already identified as being something that should be an outcome of this council, whether it's legislation, whether it's funding, whether it's other pieces. And so that's what that subcommittee will be working on. We'll then be discussing the regular meeting structure, location, and topics. And then the next meeting date and topics, which again is in November with a break in December. Our intention is to begin the regular meeting structure, which was adopted under the charter, which is a quarterly structure that moves throughout the state in different regions. And it's 1 day of talking and healing circle, and then 1 day of a more hearing style structure. And then we will go into public comment. We will go into public comment. Typically that will start at 3, but because we're trying to shift more of the comment to be throughout the council structure, or I'm sorry, the meeting structure, It may be either before or later than 3, just depending on how the conversations go in the subcommittee updates. So here's the update of the timeline. Over the next several months, staff will work with the council and the subcommittees to finalize state and third-party contracts to do the work, provide trainings and tools for the council and public to participate in this process, develop a draft strategic planning document, draft additional policies and procedures, build out subcommittee work and work product, and develop communications and web-based materials. In 2022, subject to COVID-19 constraints, the council will begin its regular quarterly meetings. So I'm going to stop sharing at this time, and we're going to go through each of the subcommittees and give a quick update. And also, let me check the chat real quick. Okay. And if anyone has anything they'd like to share at this time, we're also happy to hear from you as well while I pull up my update. And Loretta, if you have anything you'd like to add, feel free to jump in.
Nothing to add, but again, like we have specific questions for the subcommittees, but if there's anything that you came to specifically discuss, we're definitely open to hearing that. And so if you have anything you'd like to comment on, please feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and go over the engagement agreement that we have with Decolonizing Wealth Project, which we announced on Indigenous Peoples Day. So we, as I just mentioned, announced that our office, the Office of the Tribal Advisor, is going to be partnering with Decolonizing Wealth Project to provide resources and tools and facilitate philanthropic and private funding for the council's work. So 3 things. The council's work that it needs to get done right now. So whether there's opportunities to partner with academic institutions, for example, and fund fellowships or fund research work through that. The second piece is to fund community engagement. So where there are community members that would like to engage with this work, but are finding there's constraints because either they don't have funds to travel, or they don't have childcare, or they don't have other pieces that are essential for being able to join this work, that they will be able to have a pass-through grant or a pretty easily accessible grant to be able to access this council and engage with it. And then the third piece is funding the actions and the deliverables that this council will be putting in its recommendations document. So, for example, if one of the deliverables is a fund for land buyback, for example, then they would be kind of catalyzing that and funding that as well, or finding funders to fund it, not funding it personally. And so I'm just going to go through a bit of what the agreement is. And so they will be responsible for philanthropic engagement for and the development of specialized communications and storytelling deliverables about the Truth and Healing Council. So the first piece is that they're going to be working in partnership with our office and the funding subcommittee of the council to convene and facilitate a group of California-focused philanthropists and donors to build relationships and serve as ambassadors for the work of the council across the philanthropic sector. Develop and execute a grant-making program to support the engagement of Native American families and the healing opportunities presented in this process and advance the broader objectives of the council. And galvanize philanthropy to support the recommendations from the council's report. The second piece of what they will be doing is assisting with narrative change and digital storytelling. So they will lead, produce, and direct the delivery of a 2-part communications effort, which will be comprised of strategic narrative change campaign designed to bring awareness to the Council of Truth and Healing work and also advocate for truth and healing action in California and beyond. And also a digital storytelling asset. So that's either a docuseries or a documentary to highlight the Council's journey toward truth and healing. They will also, as the third piece of their services, will provide healing and wellness services. And so the truth and healing process will surface conversations and themes that will require trauma-informed resources and care for the Council members and other California Native Americans who participate. The Decolonizing Wealth Project will support in the creation of a healer collaborative. So they'll be pulling together different healers from throughout the state, and the ongoing delivery of services and resources. Healing partners will need to be engaged across California to ensure adequate support is available. Priority for partnerships will be given to California Native American-led healing organizations and groups. So that's just kind of an overview of the three different elements that they will be assisting us with. I'm happy to answer any questions about the agreement at this time, but they will also be meeting in a full council meeting, we hope in November, but we have to check with their scheduling, just to meet folks and to also meet with the council and make sure that everyone's comfortable with the agreement as well. For folks, for background, Decolonizing Wealth Project is led by Edgar Villanueva, who is a member of the Lumbee tribe. I'm getting that right? Okay, good. The Lumbee tribe, and their group generally is focused on redistributing wealth from the traditional areas where philanthropy focuses on to underserved communities and underserved projects. And so they're very much interested in shifting how philanthropy funds things and what it funds and what the values it espouses in funding different projects, in an effort to make sure that wealth generated in this country is going back to the communities that really need it the most, and especially Indigenous peoples that are still here. Am I missing anything, Loretta? Would you like to add anything at this time?
Nope, I think you covered it all.
Okay,
and I
great.
also, in the chat, I put their website in case anyone's so inclined to check it out and see what the project is all about.
Great. They will also be helping the council itself work through just baseline values, working through just connecting with each other. One of the challenges we've had in this process is that we started in the middle of COVID. And so the council members, I don't know if they've ever actually been all in the same room together. So yeah, see, they're all nodding no. So what we're planning to do is also have some facilitation of just the council members getting to know each other, working through barriers to trust, and also building up a collective just goals and mission for this project as well. So one thing that we're very mindful of is that all the council members are also members of the community. So we want to make sure that they're getting the supports and the healing resources that they need as well to engage in this work, because they're both on the receiving end, but they're also part of the community. Does anyone have any feedback at this time on that? One of the focuses that the funding subcommittee, and one of the things that they're going to be needing to prioritize and work through moving forward, is what are the types of community needs that should be funded out of the funds that are being raised by Decolonizing Wealth Project. And so they're going to need to develop a process for processing funding requests. The hope is that that community fund is stood up hopefully by January, so that community members can start applying for those funds in anticipation of the March meeting, which will be the first meeting of the council in its regular form. And so I'll just backtrack just a second. So we anticipate that the council in 2022 will revert then to its normal meeting schedule, which is 4 times a year in March, June, September, and December. And it's over 2 days. And so like I mentioned, the first day is a healing circle, and that will be a community facilitated healing circle to work through some of the issues, and then also just have a community open dialogue. And then day 2 will be more of a hearing style. One of the things that we're thinking through is how to plan around these convenings. And so we're hoping, pending COVID, that these will start being in person. And we are thinking of starting in Sacramento as a logical starting place, because if things aren't quite there yet, we have the ability to do some hybrid stuff and figure that out on the ground before in advance of that meeting. But we also think that there's some good kind of anchor places that we could start at. So we've been thinking about potentially having the initial talking and healing circle at the site of the Indian Heritage Center in West Sacramento, where the governor issued his apology originally, and having that be kind of an initial gathering space, because it's intended to be a gathering space for all California Native people moving forward. We're then thinking about the next day being more of a hearing style in either one of the state buildings or somewhere else that's more equipped for hybrid, both in person and internet-based styles of communication. But what we're also thinking about is around each of those meetings is also standing up partner opportunities to really have the community engage in a meaningful way. Loretta, you saw I was struggling, I think.
I was gonna say, like affiliate events.
Affiliate events is a great way to put it. And really have the community engage in a way so that it's a real community-wide educational experience, so that both Native folks and Native participants and non-Native people who may not even know that this is going on have the opportunity to learn about the actual history of that place and the Native presence there. So we've been really thinking about the opportunities in Sacramento and what that might look like. Obviously, having local tribes come and have something that they might speak to in that space. Where there are opportunities for different museums in the area to open up to the community just around these convenings as well. So we have Sutter's Fort and the Indian Museum over there in Sacramento that, you know, could be part of kind of a walking tour or just an Uber tour around the city that really highlights all of the pieces and reorients the public on how to think about this in the context of the truth and healing work. So we're thinking that we would like to potentially have regional planning committees similar to some of the national organizations and what they do around regional meetings. And so would really want to convene the community and whoever's interested in that space to help us think about that, so that, you know, because there are going to be spaces that we're not going to know what is the, you know, the best place and the most impactful place for us to convene. And we're going to be really relying on the community to think about that. So, you know, for example, when we're in the southern region, you know, really relying on the Southern California tribes and Native members of the community to think through what are the places that people should be visiting when they're down here. And are there places in this area, or are there places we should host this that are particularly meaningful? So that's one thing. So we'll start in Sacramento, which is the eastern region. We'll then move up in June to the northern region, just because it'll be after the rain, but before fire season. So it seems like June is probably the sweet spot for the northern region. And then for September and December, I think we're, you know, up to either central or the southern regions hosting, depending on who feels like doing that. So I got a question of who is the public. The public, I think we would lean toward members of the Native community in the area to help plan. but it's anyone outside, anyone from the Native community in that region who would like to help in that process. Okay, that was a lot of talking. Loretta, do you have anything to add beyond that?
No, I think I kind of want to open it up to everybody and see if you have, just thinking about now, planning for that time that we are able to meet in person. If you right now want to share any ideas on places. I know in the past listening sessions that we have heard places that folks have recommended. So if you have anything in mind, please let us know. Also, in terms of like a neutral place to meet, we have heard feedback from community members that it might be beneficial to have meetings in a more neutral setting, especially like the hearing style ones. And so definitely open to all of your insights. And so if you have anything, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead. M. Kinney, I see that you are unmuted.
Well, my name is Mike Raccoon Eyes Kinney, and greetings from the United Urban Warrior Society California chapter. I'm the national vice president, and the unmuting probably was an accident on my part. I'm just listening right now, but if there's something going on, I'll be sure to run my mouth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Didn't mean to call you out either. I just saw that there was an unmute. So appreciate having you here. So yeah, if anyone has any feedback on specific locations, please feel free to talk about that at this time.
Or if there are specific things that you would need to be able to participate, so like airfare, for example, or like childcare, for example, or, other travel costs, or if there are conversely things that your community is looking to do, like research, archival work, all of that. What are those needs as well? We just had a conversation with the state libraries, and they've got funds for tribes to do kind of any work related to library work. And so that a library by definition under the federal funding source is like a place that has books in it, basically. So you basically send a form and you get like about $10,000 to do stuff like this. So if there are other needs that communities or tribes have to be able to engage fully, not just in showing up to the meetings, but also in doing the work for the meetings, we'd love to hear about that. And Robert, you have gone on cam.
Hi, well, we're having dinner here at my house right now. Anyway, I missed lunch with you on Monday, so I apologize, but at least now I can have dinner with you guys. Anyway, so stuff down here in Southern California at Mitzi and Marisol from Cal State San Bernardino, they gave up the open invitation to have a meeting at CSUSB. So, that's one area. Also, Sherman High School, there's another area. Place to go down here would be Mulkey Museum, the only Indian-run museum in California. The first Indian-run museum, my Aunt Catherine founded it. Agua Caliente Museum also out in this area. So that, there's stuff down here that, and plus flying into Ontario, it's readily available. So, there's many kinds of things we can look at in terms of, like I said, I've missed you for a month, so that the Indian education part is that's what I'd be looking at in terms of, going to UCR, Cal State San Bernardino, University of Redlands, looking at the education for Indian students in those areas, and also Title VII in San Bernardino City, when they're in the education program too. I'm sure that the council members would like to see what we're doing down here for the city Indians in the urban area. And I'll mention some stuff about that later on with more open comments on, what we as educators are doing in terms of the healing process. And again, that's been my spew ever since February and March, is that we are here to heal. And that's what you're continually trying to do with the help of Assembly Member Ramos. So, again, that's just stuff for you down here. I can put you in contact with Mitzi or Marisol at CSUSB, since they volunteered. And I'm just putting it out there right now. Since they're not here, I can do that. So that's just a thought for down here in Southern California. Okay, thank you guys.
That's great. Thank you. And I like the idea of having also local tribes that people can go visit as well, because part of this is building visibility of where tribes are at right now, and you know what they're doing in their cultural development as well. Additional comments on this piece, both on locations, but also what are some funding needs that the community has in engaging with the work? Okay, so if there aren't any thoughts at this time, we do encourage you to come also on Friday to talk to the full council, because we'd love to hear your thoughts in that space as well. We have a raised hand from Madonna Feather.
Hi, thank you. I wasn't able to introduce myself earlier, but as far as location goes, I am in Sonoma County in Northern California. So we do have the Yaqueama Indian Education location in Sonoma County, Forestville. It's a place that I've been a board member there for a couple of years, but have grown up out there as a little girl. And it's a place where many people can gather. There is a traditional arbor there for our sacred ceremonies, but then there's also an area for camping. So I believe it was Crib out of Sacramento before COVID, they held one of their annual conferences there, and there was camping available. You know, there's a kitchen a kitchen that is able to, you know, have a stove and cook food. So I just want to offer that space as well for future gatherings, just because it is a sacred space for healing. And the camping's there. The little children love it out there. They're able to be safe and play. Thank you.
Thank you. We love that suggestion. And it's also something that I think the next subcommittee is thinking about in terms of hosting a GONA or a youth gathering could be a potential site for that as well. Additional comments? Okay, so the next subcommittee that we'll talk about is the Youth Council Subcommittee. And the Youth Council is here with you today. It's Councilmember Bojorquez and Councilmember Elliott Santos. And so some background on this is that the Youth Council Subcommittee was created to create a basically youth arm of this council to organize itself as it wants to organize itself and have priorities as it wants to have its own priorities. So basically a self-governance model for the youth. And so really what we're looking at right now is having an initial convening that will probably be via Zoom at this time because of vaccines not being generally available for all youth, but then also COVID constraints. But we will have a youth convening kickoff to start hearing more from the youth about what they'd like to see from this, because we'd really like to hear from the youth specifically about how to structure that, whether it looks like this council or whether it's something completely different. And the point of the youth council is to have that youth element that may be seeing things through a completely different lens based on their experiences in a completely different world from the one that many of us grew up in. And that the youth council will be doing its work pretty much in tandem and together with the regular council and be feeding in its recommendations as well. Loretta or any of the council members, do you have anything to add on that piece or any questions at this time for the community?
I'll jump in. I think the youth subcommittee is interested in hearing community feedback about youth engagement in general, and how, like, just thinking of ideas of how to reach that audience, and would like to hear ideas about that, or if your own community has a youth group, you know, looking to partner or to kind of do outreach through that avenue. And so just wanting to hear feedback on that. And I think, one of the main questions that we have had since the creation of the youth committee is kind of defining what a youth is. So at this point, we don't have, a definition of what a youth is. And so just definitely interested in hearing community feedback on different age ranges and all of that stuff. And I see we have a raised hand from a phone number. So you can go ahead and unmute. I think it's *6 to unmute your line.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. This is Ken Woodrow, Chair of Waxahachie Indian Tribe. Wouldn't it be kind of interesting if you hooked up with TANF, Temperate Cities for Needy Families, because I know they run programs for youth. I don't know if you've looked at that at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. That's a good suggestion.
I just want to say we did reach out to CRIB because of the number of tribes that they have in their programs. And so I tried to promote them to come to the listening session and help us, discuss these issues, just even the idea of what age group are we trying to reach. I do like the idea of the youth group being kind of a mirror of this council. But I know when we were talking to the director of CRIB, he said it was important that the youth form what it looks like themselves so they can feel like that they own the ideas. And so we did talk a little bit about maybe a survey that we could send out to some of the youth, to the different groups, and see if we could get some input from them. And we're really open to whatever ideas we can get them off their electronics and engaged in this work. And I think one of the great things that was brought up was if we can get the youth from all across the state to engage with each other, we know that they're going to be tomorrow's leaders. So they're going to already have that connection with each other and hopefully that view of unity across the state for all the California Indians.
Yeah, that's great. And one just observation, because it's top of mind, but I don't know that I have seen, and this is no offense to anybody who has seen it, and maybe it's just my own ignorance, but I don't know that I've seen a wholesale effort across the state to have California Native youth come together and do something big that's just California Native youth. And I think I was chatting with a friend of mine who's from the Plains, but we were talking about the Res Dog show and how it's a great show, but also it's a little bit different from how California is or how it might be in the Plains or other places. And it would be so wonderful to catalyze our youth into creating something that's very much that California flavor, so that they can see themselves in these pop culture representations and not feel left out or not feel like, there's a different experience that they're not having. And so would really love to see them create their own content that represents themselves and see themselves in those spaces as well. And hopefully I didn't just offend every single person on here by saying that. Madonna Feather, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you. As far as reaching out to youth, CRIB is something that I think is great. Also, TANF, my daughter is a youth board member with CRIB, and we live in Sonoma County. But also, the Aunties and Uncles program is ran from Sonoma County Indian Health, and their transitional age youth is up from 12 to 24. I'm an advisor to that project. And so my cousin Dean is the coordinator for that. So he's a good resource because it's not just kids in Sonoma County. Even though it is Sonoma County Indian Health, we have kids up north, and they zoom in and zoom out, and they have a lot of fun. And there's a pretty good core group of youth that they want change. They want initiatives. They're working on them. And so that was another recommendation. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you. And there's another raised hand from the 831 number.
Yes, it's Ken again. You know, I do know TANF has programs for elderly. They have programs for languages. You know, I've visited a couple of them a few times, and you know, it's really interesting. Like my aunt was doing the language program there for her language. She was able to write the dictionary for it, for her language, and she was able to save it. So there, you know, the hookup with TANF or CRIPS, you know, I may live in Monterey County, but I can be part of TANF or Indian House Services. But the only requirement is your income. You have to be very low income, which is great. I was just hoping that you guys were hooking up with them, talking to them on a one-on-one basis, because they've been doing it for decades. And, you know, they do have a good rapport. They have helped a lot of youth that I know of. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that feedback.
I was just going to ask Christina and ask our listeners that are joining us, our community, you know, these are great suggestions, but I would also ask if you're a part, or if you're in a TANF meeting, or if you're in one of these youth meetings, bring it up to the director that's there, or one of the youth, maybe one of the youth chairmen that are involved or somewhere, and say, hey, can you reach out to, you know, the tribal advisor? Can you reach out to Loretta or Christina or to Michael to help us make that connection? Because as we're listening and we try to make those connections, I think that's where some of our fall is at, is we're trying to outreach, but really make those one-on-one connections. So if you can help us make those connections by taking it into your community and say, hey, so this is the person that you need to reach out to. Here's the email. I know it got placed into the chat. You know, if you can help us do that, that would help us make those one-on-one connections. And I think that's where we need some of that help and guidance. So I would ask if you could help us do that.
Thank you, Councilmember. That is a very, very good point. And another point, you know, is that the council is not envisioned as being, you know, just a 12-person body of Native people. It's envisioned as being all of the Native people in California. And so we really do need to all work together to make these connections and make this work happen. Just because it's too much for 12 people, or being generous, 15 people with me and Loretta and Michael added. Great. Kathy, did you want to say something?
Sure. Hilly. This is Kathy coming to you from Yokuts Nation territory. I want to say that in terms of youth outreach, I know that Tule River has had a college and university and work employment fair on an annual basis for several years. And I believe it's organized by Willie Carrillo. And I just sent him a message, you know, notifying him that you are having a meeting right now. I don't know if he will, you know, receive it in time to come on today, but that's always been a really good activity and resource. And so, you know, they do have some outreach for youth from that event. So you might touch base with him or Tule River.
Great. And it sounds like from our last meeting, we need to touch base with them on their elders work as well. So we're happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did send out the link for the listening sessions to all the board members at CRIB, and I do believe Willie Carrillo was on there. So like I said, I'm trying to spread the word because I agree completely and want to urge everybody to get on these sessions, because like Christina said, it doesn't boil down to the 12 of us or the 15 of us that are doing this. We want the input from as many people as possible. So
and then we've got another raised hand from the 831.
Yes, it's Ken again. why is there only 2 members on the youth council? Shouldn't there
So,
be more?
yeah, so the issue here is that we have public meeting laws that make it so that only 2 or potentially 3 tops members of the council can meet outside of the context of the actual council meetings, and those are public meeting laws. And so that's why it is. It's not because the whole council doesn't want to do it. It's that in order to do work outside of those monthly convenings, it can't be more than 2 or 3. That said, community members are welcome to join as soon as that council has a bit more of an idea of how it's going to be convening and operating. And that's the same with all of the other subcommittees that I'm talking about today, is depending on how they organize themselves. Some of them are going to be open to community as well. So for example, I'm looking at Robert right now, we're probably going to volunteer to be on the education subcommittee. And so that's, it's the type of thing where if you're on these calls and you're hearing that there are areas where you might actually want to be really more engaged, we can actually think about that and think about expanding the membership of those subcommittees to include all of you as well. Would you like to say something, Robert?
Sure, just real quick as the educator, just 3 real quick points. Hopefully the people who are running the youth council have glanced at or read the from boarding school to suspension board report, because there's a lot of input of Native American students from grades, I believe 5 through 12, about not having a visible Native American teacher or someone they can look up to. And again, that's where I'm coming from. Also, if you can get into contact with Title VII programs in the city, and again, I've mentioned that before in San Bernardino, and then also the California Teachers Association can also be of help to look at for Indian teachers, all 5% of us in the state, but it's better than nothing. So again, that's what we're pushing for, is having that identification of people to look up to, that you could be a teacher. And again, like I said before, and 5 gazillion times, that's what I'm pushing for, is getting more Indians as teachers, especially California Indians. So, those are 3 points that, I would just suggest. So thank you again.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, and if you have thoughts about the youth questions we've just had, feel free to jump in the chat or as we continue through the other subcommittees. But I do want to touch on the elders subcommittee, because they've met as well, and they've chatted about how they might engage elders and elders' wisdom in this work. And one of the, a couple of things were noted within the context of that subcommittee. And one is that they, are wanting to get more regional representation within that subcommittee itself, so that there's not just, a couple of them thinking about this work. But then they are also most concerned about the legacy that elders that we are rapidly losing.
All of it looks good. I think whatever you care to wear.
That we're losing a lot of knowledge and a lot of first-person stories from our elders. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing in the next few years of this work is we have a component of this work, which is our office going out and doing consultation sessions, which is both talking offline about things, but then also having recording or video or transcription of the stories that tribes want to put into this work, and then any materials they'd like to submit. Along with that, though, is we're going to do an elders project where we reach out to elders and get their stories specifically, whether it's writing, video, or recording, or a transcription. And how we're thinking of doing it is either we can come to them if they're comfortable and we can get those stories, or we can give tribes and tribal communities the resources they need to gather those stories themselves, because a lot of times it's really the person doing the interviewing that makes the difference in gathering those stories. And we want to make sure that elders are comfortable in those spaces and sharing only what they feel comfortable sharing. So we're thinking of working with a few elders programs that we know are already, pretty doing pretty good things. So like Tuolumne, Tule River, we've heard to have programs already that we could just plug into and do a couple of pilot projects to see how those might work. And then feed that into this work. So I'll pause there because we've got 2 raised hands, and Madonna was first.
Thank you. I have a question on, I'm pretty new. This is maybe my 3rd meeting with this. And do you guys have a council that specifically is like natives with disabilities?
No, but we can explore that.
And then I like the Res Dogs comment too that you had suggested. I think that would be really cool. I'm Lakota and Pomo, so I'm kind of from both worlds. But I think it would be cool to have a California style skits. That would be really cool. And then for the elders, yeah, it's, they need to have somebody that they trust. Just because I work with the disabled and elderly population, they have to trust you. I definitely think that is something that should be contracted or somehow. But then like my Indian Health here in Santa Rosa, they have a senior site, right? So normally when it's not COVID, like I would go and like have lunch, like with, some aunties and, the elders that work there or that go there, because I want to talk with them. And so that would be a good suggestion, reaching out to native senior sites. And I don't know in California if they're even open. Ours is doing drive-through, so we're still feeding them, but not in person. Thank you.
Thank you. And we love that. And we were even thinking in normal times, there's like, buffet night for elders up at the casino sometimes. And so we'd love to tap into those programs or even into caretaker programs where people are regularly seeing the elders, just so that we can make sure that those stories aren't lost. One piece of that I talked to the state librarian about is they actually have an oral histories project where they have oral histories from people from throughout the state that apparently are not very diverse. And so this would be a major opportunity to have Native voices in that space as well. In the chat, we had a question about elders who were disenrolled in their family histories. This whole project and program it's not related to enrollment status. And so where there are elders that would like to tell their histories, we'd love to capture those as well. And we're not looking at, whether you are enrolled or not. So if you have elders who are interested in engaging in this process and would like to have their stories be a part of the record, we would love to help you with that. One other piece is that the way that, we have a department on aging at the state, and then we also have the state libraries. Where folks want to just submit stuff, we're going to set up a process for doing that virtually. We'll also have the ability to come and gather those materials as well in person, but we are going to have on the website a way for people to just submit documents, submit videos, submit recordings, and that way we can also facilitate your kind of doing it on your own. Even with an iPhone, and we can start capturing that content and incorporating it into this work. M. Kinney, did you have a comment?
I'm trying to stay within the parameters of the conversation about our elders here. I would like to direct to this council, to this committee, what will be the position of elders who were children in the California boarding schools? Currently, my organization, the United Urban Warrior Society California chapter, we went 2 weeks ago before the for the California Nevada United Methodist Church Conference in Sacramento with something called Resolution 21, which basically one of our members, an elder, wrote, his name is Doug Sibley, wrote, demanding that the Methodist Church for California, Nevada, give a complete accountability of what happened to 56,000 children from 1872 to 1970. In this resolution, we made the demand that they make compliance with NACPRA in terms of a full accountability of where our children are and the appropriate spiritual and ceremonial return to those nations, those territories, those bands, and the like. Right now, I am in contact with many elders who were children in those so-called religious institutions, those concentration camps. They are survivors. And that is a marketplace of a lot of people that needs to be addressed. I reached out to Mr. Parker, a part of your organization, a while back, asking what the council here was planning to do to address those issues. But we have a lot of elders throughout California that are in dire need to tell their stories. And that's why I brought this up for. The Methodist Church has agreed to the so-called 10 boarding schools, AKA concentration camps, that they will proceed to go ahead to make accountable what has happened to our children in their past. And one of the reasons I am attending tonight, I would like to make an alliance with this council for us to proceed to find where our children are and to return them home. These are crimes against humanity, against our children, and we can no longer afford to sit in silence. We can no longer afford to turn our backs. Our elders need us. I just made 68 recently, and I was one of those kids. And I would just like to thank you very much for allowing me this space to speak here. And I'm just saying that we are in touch from the north, central, south, the coast, to the mountains. The stories that we are hearing, we right now have elders who are now in that position where all of the things they're experiencing are being passed on to their children and grandchildren. And we must address that. So thank you very kindly. And that's all I have to say. So if you have any ideas, please let me know and I'll be glad to follow up. And thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I think just off the top of my head, at a minimum, the resources I just talked about, where if those elders are wanting to tell their stories, we would be happy to receive those for the council, understanding that that's part of the legacy of genocide in this state. I will tell you that we have reached out to Interior, who is doing the bigger scoping on what they have on the boarding schools, and it sounds like they'll have an initial report by spring next year. Where there are instances of California Native youth that come up in those records, we have asked that they work with us so that we can, if they have opportunities and healing opportunities and space for us to plug into, that we can have elders plug into that, but also that, you know, we're working together with the feds to figure out how to best address this issue. which will never be enough, honestly, but the council, I know, is very much aligned on this, and I think is willing and interested in doing more. So we appreciate your comments in this space. Councilmember Elliott Santos.
Yes, I just, it's super important to record the stories of the elders that we have today. We intended to do that at Manzanita so many times with my dad, and he was our leader, and then one day he was gone. And so we missed out on that opportunity. And I don't want to see any of the elders that are left miss out, but we do need funding for that. And we do need help and the expertise to do that. But once those things are recorded, once those stories of people's lives and information about our past is recorded, where do we store them? A lot of us are always asking for a way to set up archives, and then how do we allow the children that are coming up to have access to that? So I think that's a big issue. And then one of the other issues is a lot of our elders were recorded a long time ago, and those recordings are in the museums or in the hands of the colleges. I know that now in San Diego, the Museum of Man is now the Museum of Us, and they had really old recordings, and we are working with them to try to get those digitized and archived before they're no longer good anymore. So I know earlier you were talking about things that were needed, and I think that that's one thing that is needed is each region, or however we would work it, needs the money to have that type of archive for past recordings and the recordings that we should be able to do today, and then figure out a way that the younger people can access those things, because they are super important. Even for me, I didn't get to hear the language spoken as much. And at Manzanita, we don't have fluent speakers anymore. And until you can actually hear a group of elders sitting and talking and the way they pronounce things, it is very difficult to even bring the language back. And for our tribe, we do have recordings of the elders, and we have been talking about how we could get enough funding to put those recordings on a Rosetta Stone-like program, because we also believe that the youth have lost a lot of our language for those reasons of fear, or people being taken away and sent to boarding schools, or kids not being taught for fear that it could mean their lives. So funding to put that on that type of digital learning application that the kids could use could be a whole new, a new foundation for our kids, so that all the languages across California could be saved.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And one of the things I spoke to the library about, because they have this in other contexts, is how do we keep this in perpetuity? And what I was told is basically you need to have multiple copies, at least 3 copies in different locations, and at least something in print. And so as we move forward, we need to think about who gets those copies. We've heard from some tribes that the tribe should have a copy of all of the things that they've submitted, or the whole of the reports and whatever has been done. And then, that there be a copy with another institution with the state, for example, like the museum that's going to be built. And then maybe we work with Smithsonian and the NMAI for another location for that. What we've talked about also in terms of a final product is that for this to be something that's actually like a usable product, and besides the policy facing document that goes to people like legislators, it really needs to be a story that tells itself. So a lot of this content we envision being as part of a bigger like web landing page where people can navigate it easily. And if you didn't have an academic background, for example, you wouldn't have to be searching in the basement of the library archives in, a suburb of Sacramento, that you could actually just do a couple clicks and you could find, your great grandma speaking your language fluently. And so I think that is a lofty goal and something that we'll be looking to private partnerships to help facilitate. But I think the Rosetta Stone idea too, we have an example of that. I believe there's at least one tribe that's done it. So if they did it and it worked and we know what the funding is, I don't see why we couldn't do that in the context of this work, as well as even, a recommendation for, partnerships that have benefited immeasurably from being based in California, for example, stepping up and creating those resources for tribes. So Denise, did you have a comment? And you are muted, Denise.
That should be better. Thank you. I am Muskogee Creek, born and raised in California. I was a licensed registered nurse and public health nurse that accepted the Indian Health Service scholarship for my education. And part of my post-baccalaureate internship in public health with the Indian Health Service was in going to the University of North Dakota back in 1994, quite some time ago. They led a project that was spearheaded by the Indian Health Service with elder projects. And that was my choice of project, was to bring the talking circle to Cloquet, Minnesota, where I was stationed at that time and where I was doing my public health duty and internship. It's very difficult to get anything back to California because when I finished that internship and came back to California, California is so uniquely fragmented with everything, not just for Indian people, but for everybody. That's one of the reasons why we're faced with so much right now, I think. When I worked as a public health nurse, elders would tell me their story all the time during the visit. I would get more in one half-hour visit to a 45-minute visit in the home or at the community centers on the reservations or in the urban communities than physicians would get in the office. There's a respectful way of approaching that, and it's going to have to be a multi-pronged approach because I am losing my elders in Oklahoma, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama rapidly. I've lost 6 of them, 2 of them my cousins this last year, who were fluent old speakers of Muskogee, and I'm still learning to speak the language, from elders who speak the old dialect, but that dialect is rapidly dying. And I know it's the same here in California. I no longer work as a nurse, but it's got to come from the youth. It's got to come from family. It can't come from just the elders, but wherever there's a family gathering, those I have found to be the best places. And in these times, it's going to be incredibly challenging to recreate those spaces where the healing stories come from the elders in the language that they know. I just found out that my language is predominantly a verbal language. Most of our words are not easily translatable into English because they're all verbs, and it has to do with the tone of voice, not so much the word that you're trying to express in Muskogee, but it's your tone of voice, how you express yourself in the way that you communicate respectfully. And that was how I was successful working with so many different Indian people throughout the state of California, throughout Oklahoma, throughout Minnesota, North Dakota, when I was working as a nurse. And it translates over into when I was taking care of non-Indian people, because I've cared for elders since I was 23 and I'm 63. That's 40 years. So that's just my own personal and my tribal perspective when I come into this. And working with elders has always been dear to me because I didn't have any. I lost mine way too young, way too young. So, and I'm a lone elder. I'm pretty much alone. In part because of my mother's own story, and that her parents removed her from Oklahoma to escape the boarding schools there, only to find out that there was nothing here in California in the 40s and 50s when they were promised education here. So that kind of slipped away from me, but the abuse of the local schools didn't. It didn't. There's just so many. The story itself heals, and there's so many stories that need to be told with the language to preserve it. And I'm trying desperately to hold on to my language, pass it down to my nieces and nephews, my great nieces and nephews, and now my great great nieces and nephews. So it's a multi-pronged approach, and the National Archives was able to help me in tracing back my own personal story with my great grandparents, who were both fluent in English and Creek, written and spoken, which was very unusual in the 1800s, very unusual. There's more stories like that here. The fear that's there is something that we confront through illness as healthcare professionals all the time, because the illness is often related to the trauma that happened, not just in this lived generation, but the ones before. That's intergenerational trauma. So it's just some feedback. I'm willing to donate as much time and effort as I possibly can, doing my own graduate work in intergenerational Indigenous trauma, but which is a different part of my story. But it's there. We just have to mobilize to do it, to find the way. The videographies, they're there. And it has to be a family approach. As many times as I spend with my elders on Sunday afternoons, listening to them tell the stories in Muskogee, it's the sons and the daughters and the grandchildren that are around the elder on the computer, and we're all speaking to one another and listening to one another. That's one way. I don't know how it would be in California, but for the reservations that I worked on in California, elders just want to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. We very much appreciate it. We are a little past time. We've got one more raised hand, but I did want to very quickly let people know that there is a comment in the chat from Robert that is pertinent to the work of this council, and that there is, and this is not an endorsement or anything, but there is an informational hearing by the Assembly Education Committee and the Select Committee on Native American Affairs on October 27th at 9 a.m. at the Capitol. It will likely be virtual, but it will have the Superintendent Tony Thurman, Chairman Khan, who is on this council, Robert's wife, I believe, will be there, and several other folks who will be speaking to California Native American curriculum and student success, if folks would like to attend that hearing as well. So we have one final raised hand. Kenny, if you'd like to speak.
You can just call me Mike. There you go.
I'm just reading your name, so I'm going to read what your name says.
It's long-winded. Mike Raccoon Eyes Kenny. There you go. Real deal. What I was going to refer to about, I don't know, maybe 9-10 weeks ago, the Honorable Assembly Member James Ramos and myself and other individuals, we were a part of a week-long seminar that was at Cal State University, San Bernardino. And it was hosted by the Native American Indian / Indigenous Studies Department. These young adults, to put it bluntly, were brilliant. They have the Center for the Indigenous Peoples Study there. And it is my belief that that department could certainly be of a great help of not only resources, but actually helping to assist recording the stories, both verbally, video, the whole nine. They are an incredible organization of young up-and-coming talent from California Indian country. And I would recommend very highly that this council might consider making a few phone calls. Probably Assembly Member Ramos would probably be your best bet. And to go ahead and get in touch with the Native Studies Department and the Center for Indigenous Peoples Studies down in Riverside. They have an incredible and powerful availability of resources. And some of the things that, and I'll wrap this up, some of the things that have been discussed here tonight, they're already doing. So that might be something we might want to look into for future reference. So again, thank you very much. And it was nice to meet everyone tonight. And I hope everyone has a nice week. And thank you very much.
Thank you. We very much appreciate that. And if there are other institutions like that that are doing similar work already that we can kind of catalyze regionally throughout the state, we'd love to have those partners. And I think there was a concept that I brought up in an earlier meeting about in Japan, where the bomb was dropped, they have this elders program where they work with the youth to make sure that their stories aren't forgotten. And I feel like the concept of having younger people capture those stories really leans into that quite a lot, where they're hearing the stories firsthand from elders and having that nice cultural transmission with each other. So if folks have ideas about other institutions, you know, SRJC, Sonoma State, other places where there are high populations of California Native youth, we would love to partner with them and potentially have them help us with this work as well. So I do want to be mindful of time. We're almost at 10 minutes past. So if there are any final comments, feel free to put them in the chat before we close out, and I will leave it to our council members if you have any final parting words, but no pressure.
I would just like to say thank you for everyone for taking the time out of your busy day and this evening and your dinner time and joining us and sharing so much information and knowledge of wealth with us. Really appreciate it. Shoot it up.
And I would like to add, please continue to share, you know, the word about these listening sessions and the council meetings with your friends and colleagues and families, because this is really community driven. And so please continue to share it on social media and with, you know, word of mouth. Thank you guys.
Thank you to everyone. It's much appreciated, all the participation.
And if you had something that you really wanted to discuss that we didn't get to today, please, please, please join us on Friday and you can speak directly to the full council. We would really appreciate that input and that engagement within the full council meeting. So thank you, everyone. Take care. And Loretta, you've got a note.
The We Wish gathering or the We Wish class, which we'll have to touch base about this, about Mountie.
Okie doke. Well, take care, everyone. Good night.